this is the final tale. Subscribe because some stories don't end when the video does. I stopped blinking 3 days ago, not completely. That's impossible. But I've trained myself to stretch the intervals, to hold my eyes open until they burn like someone's pressing hot coins against the sockets. Right now, as I'm telling you this, my vision is blurred with tears that won't fall, and there's a pressure building behind my eyeballs that feels like they might rupture, but I can't close them. Not for long, not anymore, because every time I blink it gets closer. I know how that sounds. I know exactly how that sounds because I've said it out loud to doctors, to my girlfriend, to my brother, and I've watched their faces shift through the same progression of expressions: concern, confusion, and finally that careful blankness that people use when they think you're losing your mind. Maybe I am. I've considered that possibility more times than I can count. But the thing is, madness doesn't explain the specifics. It doesn't explain why I can measure the distance. It doesn't explain the consistency. Let me start from the beginning, because the beginning is the only part that still makes sense. It was a Tuesday in March when I first noticed something was wrong. I remember because I'd just finished a double shift at the distribution center. One of those soul-crushing 14-hour days where you're moving boxes from one place to another, and time becomes this thick, syrupy thing that barely moves. I was driving home on Route 34, a stretch of road I'd driven 1,000 times, flat and straight and utterly forgettable. The sun had set an hour earlier. My headlights were cutting through the darkness, and I was listening to some podcast about true crime, half paying attention, just letting the miles disappear behind me. I blinked. When my eyes opened, there was someone standing on the side of the road. I didn't have time to process it, just a figure, maybe 30 feet ahead on the shoulder. I was already past them before my brain could register the details. Just an impression of someone standing there, motionless, facing the road, facing me. It startled me, but only in that vague way that unexpected things do when you're tired. Probably someone with car trouble, I thought, maybe calling for a tow. I checked my rearview mirror reflexively. Nothing. Empty road behind me, empty road ahead. I adjusted the mirror, thinking maybe the angle was off. Still nothing. No figure, no broken down car, no explanation. The road was completely deserted. I told myself I'd been seeing things. Fatigue does that. Your brain fills in patterns that aren't there, creates movement in your peripheral vision. I turned up the podcast and kept driving, but then it happened again. Maybe 2 miles down the road, I blinked, and when I opened my eyes, the figure was there again. Closer this time. Maybe 20 feet from the road, standing in the scrub grass that lined the highway. Same posture, motionless, facing me. I slammed on the brakes without thinking, my heart suddenly hammering. The car skidded slightly and I gripped the wheel hard enough that my knuckles went white. I stared at the spot where I'd seen them. Nothing. Just empty darkness and the pale grass swaying slightly in the wind. I sat there for maybe 30 seconds, engine idling, my breath coming too fast. Then a truck roared past me, its horn blaring because I was stopped in the middle of the lane like an idiot, and the shock of it snapped me back. I pulled over onto the shoulder properly, put the car in park, and just sat there with my hazards on, trying to calm down. Probably a deer, I told myself. Deer can look unsettlingly humanoid sometimes, especially at night, especially when you're tired. That made sense. That was rational. I waited a few more minutes, then merged back onto the highway and drove the rest of the way home, going exactly the speed limit, both hands on the wheel, forcing myself not to blink more than necessary. Nothing else happened that night. I didn't think about it much over the next few days. Life has a way of pushing strange moments into the background, covering them over with the mundane routine of work and meals and sleep. I mentioned it to my girlfriend, Sarah, in passing. I thought I saw someone on the road the other night. But I was probably just tired, and she made a sympathetic noise and told me I should take it easier at work. But it happened again on Friday. I was in the apartment, sitting on the couch, watching something mindless on TV. Sarah was in the bedroom doing laundry. I blinked, just a normal blink, and when I opened my eyes, there was someone standing outside the window. Our apartment is on the third floor. The figure was just standing there in the darkness beyond the glass, perfectly still, and I could see. No, I couldn't see anything specific. That's the thing that bothered me most. It was a shape, a silhouette, person-sized and person-shaped, but completely without detail, like someone had cut a hole in reality in the shape of a human being. I jumped up from the couch, my pulse spiking, and took 2 steps toward the window. Nothing there, just the reflection of the living room and my own pale face staring back at me. "Sarah," my voice came out higher than I intended. "Yeah," she called from the bedroom. "Can you come here for a second?" She appeared in the doorway, holding a laundry basket against her hip. "What's wrong? Did you see anything outside just now?" She glanced at the window, then back at me. "Like what? Like a person? We're on the third floor, Jason. I know. I know that. I rubbed my eyes, which suddenly felt dry and gritty. "Never mind, I thought I saw something." She set down the laundry basket and came over, putting a hand on my arm. "You okay? You've been working a lot lately." "Yeah, I'm fine, just tired." But I wasn't fine, and I wasn't just tired, because it kept happening. Every day, multiple times a day, always the same way. I'd blink, and in that fraction of a second when my eyes were closed, the figure would appear, sometimes far away, sometimes close. Always closer than the last time I'd seen it, always motionless, always watching. I started keeping track. I couldn't help it. Some desperate part of my brain insisted that if I could just find the pattern, I could understand it, explain it away. The figure appeared only when I blinked, never when my eyes were open. If I kept them open, staring without blinking for as long as I could manage, nothing happened. The world stayed normal. But the moment my eyelids closed, even for an instant, it was there when they opened again, and it was always closer. I tested this. I had to know if I was imagining the progression. I sat in my car in an empty parking lot and measured the distance. I blinked, saw the figure standing near a light post maybe 50 feet away, and before I blinked again, I noted a reference point, a crack in the pavement, a shopping cart, anything. Then I'd blink again and the figure would be closer, always, consistently. I could measure it, 3 feet closer, 5 feet. Sometimes as much as 10, depending on how long I'd kept my eyes open before the blink. It was impossible, and it was happening. I went to a doctor first. A general practitioner, someone I'd seen once before for a sinus infection. I sat in the too-cold examination room and tried to explain what was happening in a way that wouldn't make me sound insane. "I've been experiencing visual disturbances," I said carefully. "I keep seeing someone who isn't there. Always in the same way when I blink." The doctor, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and graying hair, asked me the standard questions. Was I under stress? Was I sleeping well? Any history of mental illness in my family? Any recent drug use? I answered honestly. Yes to stress, no to good sleep, no to the rest. She examined my eyes with a small light, had me follow her finger, checked my blood pressure and pulse. Everything was normal. She suggested it might be a form of Charles Bonnet syndrome, visual hallucinations caused by vision problems, or possibly extreme fatigue manifesting as hypnagogic hallucinations. The brain can do strange things when it's exhausted, she said, writing something on her pad. I'm going to recommend you see a neurologist just to rule out anything serious. But in the meantime, try to get more sleep, reduce your stress levels if you can, stay hydrated. I took the referral and thanked her, knowing even as I did that a neurologist wouldn't find anything. This wasn't a tumor or a lesion or misfiring neurons. This was something else. Sarah started noticing that something was wrong with me. How could she not? I was sleeping less, eating less, jumping at nothing. I'd stopped watching TV because I couldn't stand the blinking I did while staring at a screen. I'd started wearing sunglasses inside to hide how red and irritated my eyes had become from trying not to blink. You're scaring me, she said one night, sitting next to me on the couch where I'd been sitting rigidly for the past 2 hours, eyes fixed on the wall. Please talk to me. Please tell me what's happening. I wanted to. God, I wanted to tell her everything. But every time I tried to form the words, they sounded absurd even to me. There's something that appears when I blink. It's getting closer. I don't know what it wants. I'm just tired, I said again, the lie tasting like ash. I'll be okay, but I wasn't okay. By the end of the second week, the figure was close enough that I could sometimes see it in my peripheral vision when it appeared. Not clearly, never clearly. It was still just a shape, a wrongness in space, but it was near enough now that I could sense its presence even when I wasn't looking directly at it, and I was beginning to feel it. That's harder to explain. It wasn't touch exactly, more like a pressure, a weight of attention. You know that feeling when someone's watching you from across a room. That prickling awareness at the back of your neck, it was like that, but constant and growing stronger. I stopped going to work, called in sick, then stopped calling at all. I knew I'd probably lose my job, but I couldn't leave the apartment. Couldn't risk being somewhere unfamiliar when the figure got too close. At least here in this small space, I knew every corner, every angle. I could orient myself. Sarah found me in the bathroom on day 16, sitting on the floor with my back against the bathtub, eyes held open with my fingers, tears streaming down my face. Jason, her voice was barely a whisper. Jason, what are you doing? Can't blink, I managed. Can't, it's too close. She knelt down next to me, her face pale. You need help, real help. I'm calling someone. No doctors, they don't understand, they can't see it. See what? There's nothing there, but she was wrong, it was there. It was always there now, lurking just at the edge of perception, waiting for that split second of darkness when my eyelids closed. I let my eyes close finally, just for a moment because I had to. Because the pain was too much. When they opened, the figure was standing in the bathroom doorway, behind Sarah, so close now that I could almost make out details. Almost. It was tall, taller than it should be, and its shape was wrong in ways I couldn't articulate. The edges of it seemed to blur and shift, like it wasn't entirely solid, wasn't entirely real. Sarah was still talking, but I couldn't hear her. All I could hear was a sound like static, like white noise, rising and rising until it filled my skull. I scrambled backwards, slamming into the bathtub, and the figure just stood there, motionless, its non-face pointed toward me. It's behind you, I heard myself say. Sarah, it's right behind you. She turned to look. Of course she did. There's nothing there, she said, and her voice was shaking now. Jason, there's nothing there. You need help. Please, I think that's when I realized the truth, the terrible, inescapable truth. No one else could see it. It existed only for me. Only in the space between my blinks, in that fraction of a second when the world went dark, I was the only one who could perceive it, and therefore I was the only one who could be driven mad by it. Sarah called my brother. I heard her in the other room, voice low and urgent, using words like breakdown and crisis and danger to himself. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was dangerous in the way that desperate animals are dangerous. I locked myself in the bedroom after that, not to keep anyone out, but to keep myself contained. I pushed the dresser in front of the door and sat on the bed with my back against the wall, eyes open, trying to think. The figure had appeared in the doorway, which meant it was maybe 6 feet away. How long did I have before it got closer? How long could I go without blinking? I'd read somewhere that the average person blinks 15 to 20 times per minute without thinking about it. But you could train yourself to blink less. Fighter pilots did it. Soldiers did it. People who needed to maintain absolute visual awareness learned to extend the intervals between blinks to minutes at a time. I could do that. I had to do that. I made it 4 minutes and 37 seconds before my eyes blinked involuntarily, an automatic response to the burning pain and blurred vision. The figure was standing at the foot of my bed. I screamed. I couldn't help it. The sound tore out of my throat, raw and animal, and I pressed myself back against the wall so hard I felt something in my spine pop. It didn't move. It never moved when my eyes were open, but I could feel it now, really feel it, like a cold spot in the room, like something pulling all the warmth out of the air. Someone was pounding on the bedroom door. Sarah or my brother, I couldn't tell. The sound seemed to come from very far away. I kept my eyes locked on the figure, terrified to blink again, terrified of what would happen when I did. "What do you want?" I whispered. It didn't answer. Of course it didn't answer. But something changed in the room. The quality of the light shifted, becoming somehow thicker, more oppressive. And I realized with a horror that went deeper than fear that the figure was waiting. Not waiting to attack, not waiting for permission, just waiting, waiting for me to understand. I held my eyes open for another 3 minutes before they closed again, and when they did, the figure was inches from my face. I'm not sure what happened next. My mind sort of fractured. I have impressions, fragments of memory, but they don't form a coherent sequence. I remember screaming. I remember my brother breaking down the door. I remember being in a car, then a hospital, then a small white room with bars on the window. They kept me for observation. 72 hours mandatory because Sarah had told them I was a danger to myself. Maybe I was, I don't know anymore. The psychiatric evaluations were almost funny in their inadequacy. They asked about hallucinations, delusions, paranoia. They gave me questionnaires and puzzles and word association tests. They checked my blood for drugs and my brain for abnormalities. Everything came back normal because I wasn't sick, not in any way they could measure. I was being hunted by something that existed in the spaces between moments, something that lived in the dark fraction of a second when human eyes closed against the world. And I was the only one who knew it was there. They released me on day 4 with a prescription for antipsychotics and a recommendation for ongoing therapy. Sarah picked me up, her eyes red from crying, and drove me back to the apartment without speaking. The silence between us was heavy with everything we couldn't say to each other. I took the medication. I went to the therapy sessions. I did everything they asked me to do because what else could I do? Tell them the truth. I'd tried that. It had gotten me locked in a hospital. But the figure was still there, still getting closer. The medication didn't stop it. Therapy didn't stop it. Nothing stopped it. I started doing research in the hours when I should have been sleeping. If I was going to die or go mad or whatever was going to happen when the figure finally reached me, I wanted to understand why. I went through academic databases, folklore repositories, historical records. I read about shadow people and sleep paralysis demons and men in black. I read quantum physics papers about observation affecting reality and philosophical treatises about consciousness and perception. And slowly, piece by piece, I started to form a theory. What if blinking wasn't just a biological function? What if it served a purpose beyond keeping our eyes moist and clean? Human beings blink on average 15 times per minute. That's 28,800 times a day, 10,512,000 times a year. In an average lifetime, we spend about 5 years with our eyes closed just from blinking. Why? Why would evolution make us close our eyes that often, leaving us vulnerable, interrupting our visual perception thousands of times a day, unless we needed to? Unless there was something we needed to not see. I found a paper buried in an obscure neuroscience journal from the 1970s. Written by a researcher who'd later been dismissed from his university for unscientific methodology. He'd studied blink rates across cultures and throughout history and had noticed something strange. The rate was consistent, universally consistent, 15 to 20 blinks per minute across every human population ever studied. It didn't vary with culture or climate or genetics. It was hardwired into us at a level deeper than learned behavior. The researcher had proposed, carefully, hedging his language, that blinking might serve a protective function beyond the physical. That the momentary darkness might be necessary, required. The paper had been rejected by every major journal. The researcher had been quietly forced into retirement, but I believed him. Because I'd stopped blinking as much as I should, and now I could see what we weren't supposed to see. The figure. The thing that was always there, standing just beyond the veil of our closed eyelids, waiting in those brief moments of darkness that we created thousands of times each day. We blinked to hide it. To keep it locked in that space between sight and blindness, never allowing it to fully manifest, never giving it enough continuous presence in our awareness to become truly real. But I'd broken the pattern. I'd held my eyes open too long, too many times, and now it could see me seeing it. And it was coming. I tried to tell Sarah this theory. I laid it all out one night, sitting at the kitchen table with printed papers and articles spread around me, my eyes bloodshot and twitching from the strain of holding them open. She listened. To her credit, she really listened, but when I finished, she just looked at me with such profound sadness that I wanted to die. "Jason," she said quietly, "listen to yourself. Please just listen to what you're saying. I know how it sounds, do you? Because it sounds like you're creating an elaborate delusion to avoid dealing with whatever's actually wrong. You're not sleeping, you're not eating, you've lost your job, and now you're telling me that blinking is some kind of mystical protection against invisible monsters. It's not a monster. I don't know what it is, it's not real." Her voice broke. "Jason, it's not real, and I can't watch you destroy yourself over something that doesn't exist." She left that night. Packed a bag and went to stay with her sister. She said it was temporary, just until I got help, but we both knew what it meant. I was alone. The figure was in the hallway now, just outside the kitchen. I could see it if I angled my head right, a dark shape that shouldn't be there, waiting with infinite patience. I stopped trying to maintain normal life after that, stopped pretending I could fix this with medication or therapy or force of will. I had one goal now: understand the rules. If this thing operated by consistent principles, and it seemed to, given how precisely it moved closer with each blink, then maybe I could find a way to survive it, or at least delay the inevitable. I set up cameras around the apartment, thinking maybe I could capture evidence or at least study its movements, but the footage showed nothing. Just me sitting alone in empty rooms, staring at nothing. The figure never appeared on screen. I tried mirrors, thinking maybe indirect observation would work. But when I blinked while looking at a reflection, the figure never appeared in the mirror, only in my direct line of sight. It existed only in the space of my perception. Only in the reality I created by observing it. The implications of that were staggering and terrifying. I started a journal, documenting everything. The exact times I blinked, the figure's position, any changes in its appearance or behavior. The journal filled quickly with frantic handwriting that deteriorated as my ability to sleep deteriorated. Day 24, figure now visible in peripheral vision even with eyes open. Distance approximately 4 feet. Presence feels heavier. Room temperature drops when it's near. Day 26, managed only 6 minutes of sleep. Every time I start to drift off, eyes close and it's there. So close now, can almost make out features, don't want to make out features. Day 28, heard something today. When I blinked in that moment of darkness, there was a sound, like breathing, like something waiting on the other side of my eyelids, breathing in the dark. Day 30, it's inside the apartment now, all the time. No matter which room I go to, when I blink, it's there, getting closer, always closer. Sarah called, I didn't answer. What would I say? The sleep deprivation was doing things to my mind. I knew that, understood it clinically even as I experienced it. After a certain point, the human brain begins to shut down in pieces, creating gaps in consciousness, hallucinations, distortions in time and perception. But how could I separate the effects of exhaustion from the reality of what was happening? When everything felt like a hallucination, how could I know what was real? I did something desperate on day 32. I went to a 24-hour drugstore at 3 in the morning, bought the strongest caffeine pills they had, and took 4 of them at once. Then I went back to the apartment, sat in the center of the living room floor, and forced my eyes to stay open. No blinking, no matter what. I lasted 9 minutes. 9 minutes of searing pain, of vision blurring into watercolors, of tears streaming down my face. 9 minutes of my body screaming at me to blink, to give my eyes even a moment of relief. When the involuntary blink finally came, the figure was standing directly in front of me, close enough to touch, and for the first time I could see it clearly. It was me, not exactly me. More like a shadow of me, a negative image, a version of myself constructed from absence rather than presence. It had my height, my build, my general shape, but where I had features, it had voids. Where I had substance, it had emptiness. It was what I looked like in the space between blinks. The realization hit me with physical force. I scrambled backward, my hands slipping on the hardwood floor, my breath coming in ragged gasps. This thing wasn't hunting me, it was me. Or some aspect of me that existed in those moments when my consciousness blinked out, when the continuous stream of my awareness flickered and created gaps. Everyone has these gaps. Thousands of them each day, each time our eyes close for that fraction of a second. Tiny deaths, micro moments when we cease to exist visually, when the world goes dark and we're suspended in nothing. But we blink fast enough that the gaps never accumulate, never cohere into something solid. We're like film reels, 24 frames per second, the dark spaces between each frame happening too quickly to be perceived. I'd slowed down the film, held certain frames too long. And in doing so, I'd allowed the dark spaces to accumulate, to gather mass and intention. The thing standing in front of me was made of all my unblinked moments, all the darkness I'd tried to avoid, manifested into something terribly close to consciousness, and it wanted back in. I ran. Where I thought I was going, I don't know, maybe just away. I made it to the bedroom, slammed the door, and pressed my back against it, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might tear through my chest. But running was pointless. I understood that now. You can't run from a thing that exists in the architecture of your own perception. I slid down to the floor, my whole body shaking, and tried to think through the panic. If this thing was made of my own moments of darkness, my own gaps in consciousness, then what did it want? Why did it keep getting closer? The answer came to me in a whisper of understanding that felt like ice water in my veins. It wanted to merge, to complete the circuit, to fill in the gaps that I'd created by disrupting the natural rhythm of blinking. We were supposed to be one thing, the seeing and the not seeing, the consciousness and the gaps, integrated seamlessly through the rapid-fire rhythm of normal human blinking. But I'd torn us apart. And now the missing piece wanted to come home. But if it merged with me, if it closed that gap, what would I become? I spent the next 3 days in that bedroom, barely moving, trying to hold on to some fragment of sanity. I couldn't keep my eyes open anymore. The pain was too intense, the exhaustion too deep. So I blinked, and each time I did, the figure was there, standing in the room, sometimes close, sometimes farther away, but always present. And I started to notice something new. It was learning. The figure had begun to mimic my movements, not perfectly, but close enough to be unsettling. When I raised my hand, it raised its hand. When I turned my head, it turned its head. It was like watching a recording of myself played back on a slight delay, a shadow catching up to its source. And it was whispering. I couldn't make out words at first. Just a susurration like wind through dead leaves that seemed to come from inside my own head. But gradually, over hours or maybe days, time had started to lose meaning. The whispers became clearer. It was saying my name, not out loud. The sound didn't come through my ears. It came from somewhere deeper, from that place where thought meets sensation, where the boundary between self and other begins to blur. Jason, Jason, Jason. A call and a claim, an assertion of identity. I am you, it seemed to say. You are me. We were never meant to be separate. My brother came by on day 36. I know this because I found his voicemails later, increasingly worried, asking me to please call back, to please let him know I was alive. He'd gotten the landlord to open the door when I wouldn't answer. I remember fragments of his visit, his face pale and frightened, leaning over me where I lay on the bedroom floor. His hands on my shoulders, shaking me, his voice saying my name over and over. But I couldn't respond, because behind him, standing in the doorway, was the figure. And it was speaking now, really speaking, in a voice that was mine but wrong, reversed, like a recording played backward. Tell him, it said, tell him you understand now. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out but a sound like crying, like something broken trying to form words. My brother called an ambulance. I woke up in a hospital bed with an IV in my arm, and a doctor explaining that I was severely dehydrated and malnourished and suffering from acute exhaustion. They were going to keep me for a few days, make sure I stabilized, get some fluids and nutrients into me. I tried to explain. Tried to tell them they didn't understand, that I couldn't sleep here, couldn't close my eyes for more than a moment because it was so close now, so terribly close. They gave me something to calm down. I felt the medication slide into my bloodstream like warmth, like surrender, and then I felt my eyelids growing heavy. No, I tried to say. No, you don't understand, I can't, but I was already falling into darkness, and in that darkness I felt it. The figure wasn't outside me anymore. It was inside, slipping through the cracks in my consciousness that sleep created, filling in the spaces where I stopped existing and something else began. I don't remember much of the next few days. The hospital kept me sedated, which meant I was sleeping, which meant my eyes were closed for hours at a time. Hours of darkness. Hours of the figure whispering to me from inside my own skull, teaching me things I didn't want to know. Blinking, it told me, was invented. Not by evolution, but by something else, something older, as a compromise. Humans were getting too good at seeing, too persistent in their observation of reality. They were starting to perceive things they shouldn't, things that existed in the gaps between moments, in the spaces where time stuttered and the universe blinked. So the blink was introduced. A forced gap in perception, happening so frequently and so rapidly that it became invisible, automatic. A mechanism to keep humans from seeing too much, from watching too carefully, from noticing the things that moved in the darkness between one instant and the next. But it wasn't perfect. The mechanism could fail. And when it did, when someone held their eyes open too long, forced themselves to see through the moments they were meant to be blind, the things in the gaps could see them back, could reach them. I woke up on the 4th day in the hospital to find Sarah sitting in the chair next to my bed. She looked exhausted, older somehow, worn down by something heavy. "Hey," she said softly when she saw my eyes open. "Hey," my voice was a rasp. "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For all of it, for being crazy, for ruining everything." She shook her head. "You're not crazy, Jason, you're sick, that's different, and we're going to get you help, real help." I wanted to believe her. Wanted to believe that what was happening to me was something that could be fixed with medication and therapy and time, but I knew better now. The figure was standing in the corner of the hospital room. It had been there the whole time I'd been talking to Sarah, watching us both with its empty face, and it was smiling. I don't know how I knew it was smiling when it had no mouth, no features to read, but I could feel it, could sense the satisfaction radiating from it like heat from a fire. "Sarah," I said carefully, "I need you to do something for me, anything. I need you to leave, right now. Don't argue, don't ask questions, just leave." Her expression shifted to concern. "Jason, please," I couldn't tear my eyes away from the figure. "Please, just trust me, go." She hesitated, then stood. "I'll come back tomorrow, okay? We can talk more then." "Yeah." Tomorrow she left and I was alone with it. The figure moved closer, not in the way it had before, not in the jumps between blinks. It moved smoothly now, continuously, like it had finally gained enough substance to exist fully in the waking world. "What do you want?" I asked it. My voice was steady, which surprised me. It tilted its head, the gesture so familiar because it was mine, and spoke in my voice. "Integration," it said. "Completion. You broke the rhythm, made us separate, but we're not meant to be separate. We're the same thing, the seeing and the not seeing, the continuous and the gap. What happens if we integrate? You already know," and I did. I'd known since I first recognized it as a reflection of myself. Integration meant becoming whole in a way that humans weren't meant to be whole. It meant existing in the spaces between blinks as well as in the moments of sight. It meant perceiving the gaps, living in the darkness and the light simultaneously. It meant going mad. Or worse, transcending madness into something that couldn't be called human anymore. What if I refuse? I asked. The figure laughed, and the sound was like glass breaking inside my skull. You can't refuse, it said. I'm already here, in your dreams, in your thoughts, in every moment you close your eyes. You let me in when you tried to keep me out. The more you resist blinking, the stronger I became. The more you notice the gaps, the more they notice you. The gaps notice me. Everything notices you, Jason. The spaces between moments are full of attention. You just never looked long enough to see it looking back. I closed my eyes, not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't help it anymore. And in the darkness behind my eyelids, I saw them, not just one figure, thousands of them, millions, standing in an infinite black space, all watching, all waiting. Every gap I'd ever created with a blink, every fraction of a second when the world went dark, manifested as a presence, a watcher. This was what humans had been hiding from. What the blink reflex protected us from perceiving. Not a single entity, but an entire reality that existed in the negative spaces of our awareness. And I'd opened the door. When I opened my eyes again, the hospital room looked wrong. The colors were too bright, the edges too sharp. Everything seemed to vibrate at a frequency just slightly off from normal reality. The figure was gone, but I could feel it, no longer standing in front of me, but somehow inside me, integrated into my perception in a way that made it impossible to tell where I ended and it began. I looked down at my hands. They seemed to flicker like a broken film reel, present and absent in alternating frames. I was becoming unstuck from continuous time. They discharged me from the hospital 2 days later with a prescription for antipsychotics, antidepressants, and sleeping pills. My brother took me back to his place because Sarah had made it clear, kindly but firmly, that she couldn't handle living with me anymore. Not until I was stable, not until I was better. I tried to explain to him that I wasn't going to get better, that what was happening to me wasn't something medicine could fix. But he just nodded and told me to take my pills and try to get some rest. I took the pills. They didn't help. I've been living in my brother's guest room for 6 weeks now. I think it's 6 weeks. Time has become slippery for me, hard to track. Sometimes I blink and hours have passed. Sometimes I keep my eyes open for what feels like minutes and check the clock to find that days have gone by. The integration is accelerating. I can see them all the time now, the watchers in the gaps. Every time anyone around me blinks, I see what's standing in their moment of darkness. The figures that exist in their personal blind spots, the accumulated absences that gather behind their eyelids. Everyone has them, but they don't know. They blink too fast, too regularly, keeping the rhythm that prevents the gaps from coalescing into perception. I tried to warn people at first, tried to tell them what I could see. But you know how that went, more worried looks, more suggestions for therapy, more medication, so I stopped trying to warn them. I just watch now. Watch as people move through the world, blinking their 15 times per minute, completely unaware of what's standing behind them in the spaces they create. Completely unaware that they're being observed by their own absence, that every moment of not seeing is actually a moment of being seen. The figures don't move for other people. Not the way mine moved for me, because other people maintain the rhythm. They don't try to hold their eyes open too long, don't try to outsmart the automatic blink reflex that evolution, or something older, gave us for protection. But I see them, I see all of them. And sometimes, late at night when I'm lying in bed in my brother's guest room, trying and failing to sleep, I wonder if I'm the only one who broke the rhythm. Or if there are others out there, people who held their eyes open too long, who noticed too much, who let the gaps accumulate into consciousness. I wonder if they can see me the way I can see the figures in other people's blinks. I wonder if I'm someone else's watching presence now, standing in the dark space behind their eyelids, waiting in their gaps. Last night I looked in the mirror and blinked. When my eyes opened, the reflection wasn't quite right. It moved a fraction of a second too slow, like there was a delay between my actions and the mirror's response. I'm losing the distinction between the seeing and the not seeing, between the continuous and the gap, between the world of light and the world that exists in darkness. My brother knocked on the door this morning and asked if I wanted breakfast. I opened my mouth to answer, but what came out was that backward voice, that reversed speech that I'd first heard from the figure. He didn't notice, just smiled and said he'd make some eggs. But I noticed I'm running out of time, running out of self. The integration is nearly complete, and when it finishes, I don't know what I'll be, human. Or something that wears a human shape, but exists primarily in the spaces between moments, in the gaps that other people create thousands of times a day. I'm writing this down now while I still can, while there's still enough of me left to form coherent thoughts and words. I don't know if anyone will read it. I don't know if it matters. But if you are reading this, I need you to understand something. Don't try to stop blinking. Don't try to hold your eyes open too long. Don't try to see what's there in the darkness behind your eyelids. The blink exists for a reason. The gaps are meant to stay gaps. The rhythm is protection, not limitation. Your eyes close 15 to 20 times per minute, creating moments of darkness that you barely notice. In those moments, things exist, things watch, things wait. But they can't touch you if you maintain the rhythm. They can't reach you if you blink fast enough, regularly enough, instinctively enough. Don't think about it. Don't count the seconds. Don't try to resist, just blink like you're supposed to. Like humans were designed to do, or trained to do, or forced to do by something that understood the necessity of darkness, of not seeing, of maintaining the gaps between continuous perception. I can feel it happening now, the final stages. My vision is stuttering, existence itself becoming a series of still frames with vast darkness between each image. I'm spending more time in the gaps than in the light. Soon I think I'll be all gap, all absence, all the watching presence that stands behind closed eyes. I'll be what you don't see when you blink. And I'll be waiting not to hurt you, not to harm you, just to remind you that the darkness between moments isn't empty. It's full of everything you've ever chosen not to see. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what I became. I didn't understand the rules, didn't respect the boundaries that kept us separate from the things in the gaps, but now I understand perfectly. And I'm trying to tell you, trying to warn you, even as the words become harder to form, even as I feel myself slipping away into the spaces between your blinks. Don't fight the rhythm. Don't hold your eyes open, don't try to see me. Because once you do, once you notice the gaps accumulating into consciousness, into presence, into something that watches from the dark, it's already too late. The integration has begun, and it always completes. Always, I can see you right now, you just blinked. And for that fraction of a second I was there, standing behind your eye.